The ditch water steamed under my flashlight, and my breath sounded too loud in the hood. Something moved beyond the sycamores, not like a deer, not like a man. The night went silent, then a wet, clicking cough came back at us from the dark. Deputy Satterfield tightened his grip and whispered my name. In the beam, two eyes lifted over the bank and the reeds bowed flat. Men had asked me to set it down plain. If you could, like this video, subscribe to this channel for further reports and comment below with your thoughts while memory held fast. It began 3 weeks earlier, on 25th April 1973, when the White County dispatcher in Carmi rang my cruiser and told me to meet Marshal Starks at Enfield. A farmer had reported something big in his yard. I carried my department-issued .38, a 2-cell Eveready, and a Polaroid camera borrowed from evidence. The roads smelled of wet, plowed ground. Near the McDaniel place, dogs that usually raised Cain stayed tucked under porches. From the tree line came a slow, hollow thump, like a sack dropped in mud. I told myself it was a stray calf and laughed at notion. Starks waited by his Plymouth with Trooper Jim Carter and Deputy Earl Satterfield, who had a new baby and spoke of her as if she were a compass point. Carter offered me a cigarette and struck a match against the patrol door, sheltering the flame from drizzle. We listened to Mr. McDaniel explain, quiet and embarrassed, how a thing as tall as his porch rail had lunged at his girl. In his garden, we found 3 impressions in soft soil, round as dinner plates, spaced too far for any dog. Satterfield measured them with his tape and frowned without speaking. Starks said it must have been a bear let loose from some roadside show, though there had not been bears in White County for a lifetime. We mixed plaster of Paris in a coffee can and poured it into one print. The cast set with odd ridges, as if the weight had shifted mid-step. At dusk, a low fog slid out of the bottoms along the Little Wabash, stopping short of the yard like a halted wagon. The air cooled in that band and our breath showed. Carter tried the radio to Carmi. It crackled, then went dead for minutes. We walked the lane with our lights kept low, as if we expected a poacher, not a phantom. The corn stubble whispered under boots, then stopped where the ground turned slick and black. There, a line of fence posts leaned inward, new gouges cut through creosote, deep and parallel. Mr. McDaniel kept saying, "It bounced," as if he needed the word to stay calm. I heard, far off, a childlike call that matched his youngest boy's voice, though the boy sat in the kitchen behind a locked screen. Carter lifted his hand for silence, and even the crickets obeyed him. At first light, we followed the prints toward a shallow drainage ditch that cut the soybean field. They were not clawed like a bear and not split like a hog, just broad pads with a blunt toe mark at the front. The stride measured nearly 6 feet. 10 yards on, they ended as cleanly as boot prints on a porch, with no scuff, no slide, no return. In that same spot, the air smelled of damp pennies and sour musk. Starks rubbed his jaw and said somebody was playing games. Satterfield spat tobacco and stared into the ditch without blinking. Within a week, the calls multiplied, first from Enfield, then from Crossville, then from the farm roads toward Norris City. People described the same thing: grey, heavy, moving in bounds, with eyes like reflectors. The sheriff wanted it quiet, more to spare the county from ridicule than to spare anyone fear. We formed a night detail. Carter brought a 12-gauge and 2 boxes of buckshot. I carried a portable tape recorder from the courthouse, hoping to catch the strange cries. Starks drove, jaw tight, saying little. On May 9th, we set up near the old river bridge and waited. That evening, the bottoms held a steady mist that swallowed our headlamps and left water beading on our gun barrels. The first sound came at 10:40, a series of 3 knocks spaced like a man's signalling. We answered with 1 knock on the cruiser door. A 4th knock came back, closer. Then nothing at all, as if every frog and whippoorwill had taken a vow. The temperature fell so fast my fingers stiffened on the recorder switch. When we swept the ditch, we found our survey ribbon torn from a sapling and twisted into a hard knot above our heads. At 11:05, the tape recorder hissed and began to spin without my thumb on the button. The reel moved, stopped, then moved again, catching a faint, breathy syllable that sounded like Earl. Satterfield jerked as if struck. In the same moment, the Q-beam Carter held winked out, though the battery was fresh. A shadow rose in the fog, taller than the fence line. Something heavy struck the cruiser roof with a denting thud, and wet grit slid down the windshield. Carter fired 1 round into the air, and the night answered with laughter. Not loud, but right beside us. We did not speak for a full minute. I ran my hand along the roof and felt the fresh dent, still trembling from the impact. There was a smear across the paint, grey and slick, with a few coarse hairs embedded like wire. Carter said, "Raccoon," but his voice lacked force. Satterfield kept his eyes on the ditch and swallowed hard, working his jaw the way a man worked a cough. When the fog thinned, we saw tracks in the road dust leading to the bean field, then vanishing where the ground turned to standing water without a ripple behind. Near midnight, a cow bawled from a pasture to our south, a sound strained and high as a siren. We drove that way and found the herd pressed tight against a gate, eyes showing white. The stench hit first, a rank mixture of pond mud and something gone sweet in the sun. Beyond the gate, and in the black between hedgerows, a shape moved on 3 strides, then stopped. It swayed, as if balancing weight that did not belong on any known bones. When Carter flashed his light, the beam returned in 2 points and slid sideways with impossible speed away. By May 12th, the Illinois State Police had been notified, and a conservation officer from Harrisburg joined us with a tranquilizer rifle that looked too clean for the bottomland. He spoke of escaped exotics, even kangaroos, and I clung to that notion like a life raft. We marked a cedar at the pasture edge where bark had been peeled in long crescents, 8 feet above the ground. The wood underneath was wet and smelled of ammonia. Our radios worked only in bursts, each message interrupted by a soft clicking, as if someone listened and answered with teeth from the fog. On the 14th, we planned a wider sweep, using the USGS Enfield quadrangle and a Brunton compass Carter kept from his army days. Satterfield refused the map and stood by the cruiser, chewing tobacco until his cheek bulged. "I got no quarrel with wild things," he said, "but this is not wild." Stark snapped at him to keep his voice down, then apologized with a look, the sort men gave when they thought of wives waiting up. We strung reflector tape along the ditch and agreed to fire only if it charged. I checked my watch and wished for dawn. At 220, a series of bounds carried something across the gravel road ahead of us. The stones did not shift. It landed by an abandoned smokehouse and the boards shuddered. The air around it turned colder than the rest of the night, It's a pocket that raised goose flesh on my arms. Then came that clicking cough again, followed by a rough imitation of Carter saying my surname. I swung my light and caught a sloping shoulder and a long forearm ending in a blunt hand. On the smokehouse door, mud prints sat in a triangle, each as wide as my palm. Word leaked despite the sheriff, and by the next weekend, 2 men from Evansville arrived with a 35mm camera and a flash cubes, hoping for a monster picture. Starks sent them away, but the roads held onlookers with rifles resting on truck hoods. We worked past them, ashamed and angry. In the ditch, we set a leg-hold trap meant for coyotes and wired a chicken crate as bait, though I disliked the cruelty. Toward dawn, the trap chain was found snapped, links twisted as if by pliers. The chicken remained alive, but its feathers were slicked down with grey slime. On June 16th, we returned to the McDaniel yard, believing the thing circled back to where it had first shown itself. Fog came early and carried the sour musk that now meant trouble. The reflector tape we had hung was gone, not a shred left on nails. Only later did I recall the hard knot above our heads and understand it had been a warning. We took positions along the ditch, each man able to see the next lantern bobbing in mist. Then the woods fell silent, and my stomach tightened with the certainty that we were watched from close. The eyes rose again, and the fog around them billowed as if pushed. I saw the outline: thick torso, narrow head, 3 legs in the mud, and a 4th limb lifted like a hand. Its hide shone grey under lantern light. The clicking cough fell into a pattern, a 2 short and 1 long, then my breathing came back from its throat. Carter shouted. It bounded up the bank, clearing 6 feet, and landed between Satterfield and me. The ground shook. I smelled rot and hot metal. Satterfield fired twice. The rounds struck without a sound, as if into water there. Stark seized Satterfield and pulled him back, motioning us to fall in. I retreated and felt a cold pressure brush my sleeve. Carter fired into the bank. Sparks jumped. The creature bounded away in 3 leaps, each beyond our lanterns. At the road, the cruiser would not start. We listened to clicking from the field while I pumped the gas. Then the motor caught, and we drove to Enfield, headlights dimming. At the station, we laid the cast, the hairs, and the dented roof before the sheriff. He wrote "unknown animal" and underlined it twice and told us to rest. The official report went to Springfield with the phrase "possible hoax," though no one explained the cast or the dent. The papers printed jokes about kangaroos and backwoods deputies. I kept silent and kept the tape reel unmarked because it held that whispered Earl and the echo of my breathing. Years passed. In 1984, I met Carter at a diner near Fairfield, off Route 45. He had gone grey and flinched at the clink of coffee spoons. He asked if I dreamed of fog. I said yes, and we stared at our hands until the waitress left without touching food. In 1999, a boy found the plaster cast in the courthouse basement, and I watched him drop it. I drove to the McDaniel place, and the ditch ran under sycamores. The day was warm, yet a strip along the bank felt cold on my face, on the same pocket from 1973. No tracks showed, but the fence posts carried gouges. What animal learned a man's breathing? I never answered. In later years, when rain tapped the window in 3s, I lay awake and waited for the 4th. A grey smear stayed on the cruiser roof long after the paint shone again.